All right, one of our, it might be, I think it's our last food for thought session. We're always trying to introduce some new ideas, new stakeholder ideas, and one of the ones that we know we have missed over the last couple years is kind of a tribal perspective on this. And as you even heard on the last panel, you know, they call them Aboriginals up in Canada. Much stronger voice in Canada these days, and increasingly so. The same's going on in the U.S. I think somebody mentioned the Cowboy Indian Alliance yesterday, and so we really searched out, and I'm glad to introduce Frank Bibeau, who is the tribal attorney for Honor the Earth out of Minnesota, and he's going to give us a different perspective as soon as I can actually find his presentation. I see it. There it is. Mr. Bibeau.
Thanks, Carl.
Up and down buttons.
Okay. Bonjour. Good morning. My name is Frank Bibeau. Live up in northern Minnesota. One of the Anishinaabe is what we would call ourselves, but I would tell you that we're also known as the Ojibwe, and more predominantly with our treaties as the Chippewa. And so I just talk about this as treaty rights and reserved rights. It's more of a story, almost like with the title. I thought it was kind of interesting and definitely food for thought. In our world, our creation stories led us to where the food grows on the water, and that food is wild rice. And we started closer to the East Coast, but our territory is really all around all of the Great Lakes, and it goes up into Canada. And some of the old stories or law cases talk about our territory being 800 miles across and 1,000 miles north and south. And technically, those of us in Minnesota and Wisconsin, Michigan, we're called the Southern Ojibwe. Most of us are actually in Canada. So in our creation stories, we were brought by the Amiga shell with all the other animals, and we came through all the chain of Great Lakes, and we came through in birch bark canoes. And that was the tool that we had that everybody else learned to take from us and use to make their voyagers and things like that. So in 1803, the Louisiana Purchase, when you look at that, I live up there where the little hump is, where it starts to come across before it comes down. And so for a long time as tribal members, we really didn't have anybody that we were dealing with regularly, whether it was the French, the English, the United States, because territories were still being swamped and exchanged and things like that. We have 44 treaties as the Chippewa with the United States. I don't know that there's another tribe that has that many treaties. Most tribes have 1 or 2 treaties. And so as a consequence, a lot of people don't understand the rights and powers that we have. And I would tell you that under the 1825 treaty, we retained the right to hunt, and the right to hunt was divided on a border from the Prairie du Chien, and everything north, we gave permission for people to hunt, and everything south, the Lakota gave permission to hunt. And in 1832, in the first Trade and Intercourse Act, it says every person other than an Indian can only hunt for sustenance. We've had the right to hunt and fish commercially forever because we had it before, and we still have those rights. And so we have rights to the territory that people don't always understand. And they were talked about in the Declaration of Independence. They call them inalienable rights: life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. They're real simple, but those were 200 years ago, and people forgot some of those words. So in Minnesota, this is one of my favorite maps in Minnesota, became a state in 1858. They still hadn't taken all the land from us yet. That's how much of a hurry things get in, even with pipelines. So I live in the Blue Territory. I live by that big lake in the middle. That's called Leech Lake. It's on Leech Lake Reservation. This slide, I think, is pretty important for the Great Lakes because it's all fresh water where we live. The fresh water starts where we live. We live essentially at the top of the world except for the Rockies. This is an old picture of Winona LeDuc, who's our executive director for Honor the Earth. And it's a real simple thought, but people seem to confuse us and call us activists and other things, and really what we are is we're protectors. We're not protesting, we're protecting. And people are confused about that, and we're driven in a different way. This was a picture earlier this summer of some of the guys before we started the horse ride across Minnesota for the pipeline to bring awareness to what was going on, because like people talk about, people don't even know that there's pipes and where they are. There's 8 pipelines that run by my house on the reservation. This is Winona. She was out on the horse ride, and it's hard to believe what you have to do to bring attention to get to the press. If you have a lot of money, you're in the oil business, you can send out press releases, you got teams on the press corps and everything else. We have to try to ask people to do stories about us, or we have to write them ourselves and bring people together. Much like the Cowboy and Indian Alliance, the people where we live all live on lakes and rivers and aquifers, and we're concerned about the fresh water. And so really canoeing is more of what's going on with us. This was a nice day on Sandy Lake, and Representative Rick Nolan's office brought his first letter to the PUC to let them know that he thought treaty rights should be respected. And other people have been doing that more too. The PUC isn't necessarily respecting them, but that's beside the point. Operation Square Hook is a recent case that happened in Minnesota, and I point to it for people who want to understand how our treaty rights are different than other people's treaty rights. A lot of the treaty rights from the western part of the United States, because of the scarcity of water and resources, especially the Columbia River treaties with the Yakima and different tribes up north in Washington and so forth, their treaties refer to having to have exclusive areas to fish on reservation, and the customary places off reservation are held in common with the citizens of the territory or the United States. In our 1842 treaty, it says that our rights are only held amongst the Chippewa of the Great Lakes, and then also of the Mississippi. So our rights are exclusive even from the United States. And that's what that decision says. And the decision goes on to say Congress can change that, but they have to talk to us. And so if they're going to take our rights, they have to compensate us. The oil companies don't seem to think that. They don't even want to meet with us. They're getting closer. My professor from law school and also my co-counsel, he's got one publication out right now that I think would help people understand a lot more about reserved treaty rights, because people like to see the words in a treaty. And what I have to tell people about the reserved rights doctrine, you know, if I'm up here and I'm talking about this glass of water and how wonderful water is, and I say, I'll sell you this glass of water, and you come up to get the glass of water, I didn't sell you the pitcher, I didn't sell you this glass, and I didn't sell you this. But the United States and other people seem to think, well, we thought we got it all. You didn't get the right to starve us out, you didn't get the right to all the animals, and you didn't get the right to all the water, and you can't pollute everything. None of those things were given up. That would be crazy. So if you're interested in a little bit more on treaty rights, I was interviewed by PBS. It's a big question show out of Chicago, and it gives you a little 25-minute intro. When I was thinking about what to say, besides already knowing a lot of this already, and what I heard on the panel before, I was looking at some of the 5 BC nations, the British Columbia, the next-door neighbors to Alberta, and they want the same thing we all want. We want to protect the right to free, prior, and informed consent. And it doesn't work that way for us. They identify the grounds of their litigation for failure to involve First Nations, failure to provide necessary information, denying direct consultation, failure to even issue the reasons why our stuff isn't even considered. We're used to it, but we're tired of it. So this print, this is wild rice. This could be any lake in northern Minnesota. This is the same canoe you saw a picture of that comes out of the Smithsonian in Washington. This is the food that grows on water. This is the food that we go out and harvest every year. And you have to have clean water. Wild rice is like the canary in the mine. And wild rice is what they're concerned about with Polymet also, because of the runoff from all of that. And so people know these things are bad, but as I've talked with people around here when I worked for the state of Minnesota with water quality probably 30 years ago now, they were trying to find acceptable levels of degradation. That's not how we look at it. We look at prevention and protection. So with what's going on currently, you look at this red line. That red line used to go all the way straight down to where it ends over in Superior and Duluth. But that corridor has such narrow areas between some of the big lakes that you can't squeeze any more pipes in. And we've already had where that little part comes down at Crookston, they had a big explosion and fire there. And not too far from where I live, and that's only 20 miles from the Mississippi, not too far from where I live in Cohasset, which I can't just point to on there, we had a big spill, and they had to burn it off. That was probably within a mile of the Mississippi River. Now, I can't tell you how many times they want to cross the Mississippi River and how many times they have and everything else, but this route is more direct impact than anything else we've ever even thought about. We were flabbergasted when this was suggested as a preferred route. And now, Enbridge wants to add Line 3 to whatever route. And so now it's a double down already. And the PCA, our pollution control, and DNR and things like that, they understand that because the current corridor is oversaturated, that whatever is used next is going to also start expanding. And so we have to start thinking about planning for the future, not just letting someone say, well, this looks like a pretty good route. You know, we think it was just drawn with a crayon ourselves, but they say there was study that went into it. These are some of our ceded territories. Ironically, our ceded territories, and part of it's the way geography works, our ceded territories are bordered on the south by I-94. And so our suggestion for the alternative was to take the pipeline and run it on the west side of 29 until you get down to Fargo. Then you cross the river with a bunch of safety stuff, because that's the only way we'd even think about it. And then you have to run it all the way down on the south side of 94. And that way, it's almost impossible to contaminate the freshwater resources. We live at the top of the world. And when I say that, the Mississippi flows all the way down to here. It starts where we live. When you get to the west, the Red River flows to Hudson Bay. And when you get to Duluth, it goes all the way to the Atlantic. So we are talking about everything. We are talking about most of the population in the United States. One of the things I pointed out at the PUC, if you remember, I think it was Cleveland, they had that algae bloom. In 3 days, they were out of fresh water in all the stores. 3 days. And they were black marketing it in towns and cities. People don't understand what happens when water disappears. Every living thing needs water. Not dirty water. They need clean water. This is a picture of Chief Flatmouth, one of the signatories of the 1855 treaty when I was in Washington trying to get compensation for the lands and timber that were taken in the 1800s and early 1900s. And we finally did get that compensation. It's 100 years late. But, you know, we're getting along. Ironically, do I have the other one? There's Chief Buffalo. So I was up in the Capitol, and these busts were carved by some sculptor in the 1800s. And ironically, they were lost. They didn't know who they were. When I asked to go see them, they were on two sides of a window, and in the window was the United States Supreme Court. They have done more to us than anybody else. And so it's almost ridiculous to have the statues of our two leaders with this in between. I mean, talk about enlightening. So anyway, this is the reservation. Those are the three original 1855 reservations. And kind of like Nia Bay with out there in Washington, you'll see that we're reserving water as well as land because we know where the fish are. We were called the people of the falls until they dammed everything up and there weren't any waterfalls left because the water stays open in the winter. The fish congregate there. The animals come to drink. All of that's been taken away. It's all been moved. It's all been shifted. Laurentian Divide, I'm probably within 15 miles of this sign on Highway 6. It is the top of the world. These paddle boats, I've had a chance to learn more about them. They had them as small as a 5-foot paddle, and they would use them to run mail up and down the little tiny rivers and things like that. They had paddle boats in places I couldn't even believe that they could bring all the way up to Mississippi River. They had them in those different lakes. Where are they? In those different lakes, over here in Cass and Winnebagosh and Leech and even up in Bemidji, they had paddle boats came all the way up the river. It's amazing, you know? But those things don't happen anymore. This was, we had to modify Enbridge's map. They had the map, but they didn't have our territory on it, which is in green, and they didn't have any of the reservations on it. And they also didn't have very much blue on it, which is water. We have over 1,000 lakes in Itasca County. We couldn't even find the Mississippi River on here. So when we look at maps, that map that was a joke the other day from the quadrangle map that was submitted from 1980, I mean, this is intentional. Chief Buganagiza, this was the last great Indian battle in the United States, happened at Leech Lake. It happened in 1898, and it happened because people kept infringing on the promises they made and wouldn't stop. And they were taking our timber and taking our land. They would set fires and knock down trees and say they're dead and down and keep cutting. 1898, what they used to do was they'd take Indians like Bug, and they'd say, oh, you've been drinking alcohol. That's against the law for the Indians. They'd take them to Duluth, 100 miles away. They'd wait for the witnesses to show up. There'd be no witnesses. And they'd say, okay, you can go. He'd have to walk home 100 miles. When they came to get him the last time, it didn't work. They came to Walker. There was over 100 soldiers. They'd lost 6 soldiers, including 1 officer, and nobody came back in to ask any questions. Now, I would tell you the very next day, the Indians also had articles in all the major newspapers around the area saying, look, we asked. We told you. We were upset. They changed their attitude for a couple of years, came right back, new people. They always forget. This was the delegation a year later that went to Washington in 1899. This is me and my uncle, 1972. It hasn't changed. This is one of my first trips when I moved to Minnesota, my grandfather's canoe. And what I found out about that canoe is it's not just my grandfather's canoe, but it was his brother's canoe. And I'll be passing it on to one of my cousins. This is what wild rice looks like when you're out harvesting it, just like in that picture. This is an older picture of it. Sometimes the pulling is done from the front, but it's always gathered the same way. This is a wild rice silo. There used to be so much wild rice gathered by the Indians that this was beside a railroad track, just like any other grain elevator. And it would be shipped out to a lot of places. So at the end, this is what we know. You can't eat the money that they try to give us for what they're taking. And we know that we're not going to have our environment and other things. And that's our real concern. And so, in a sense, I guess I would say, I wore this bolo so you would see Turtle Island, and so you would see the field of oil around it. And this is how big the field of oil is on me compared to who we are in the fight. In case you're wondering, the medicine wheel has 4 colors. It's the 4 colors of man, the 4 directions, things like that. It's all meant to be unity, but we still don't see much of that either. So I guess my real message from Winona would be love water, not oil. And if you're familiar with it, no switcheroos either, because we're having a little problem in Canada there with our border switcheroo, and we're going to have to, we've already had to file litigation against that and against the State Department. So we're in a different kind of a struggle, but we're hoping that others will also work with us that we have been working with, and I think it's going to expand to Wisconsin. And I think the people who are over at the Cowboys and Indians to the west, we're going to be working with them as well. We don't have any choices. I don't know how it's going to end, but I know what's not going to happen because there's some serious people out there, and we don't have any other choices but to stand up because our voices aren't heard very well. There's not that many of us speaking. I appreciate your time. I don't want to take any more. We have a drawing. It's customary in our culture to have drawings and giveaways. I was surprised a little bit when because I didn't think about the kind of conference I was at when I started talking about this, and then I was reminded that it was an oil conference, and so you don't have to have people hustling for money and asking for donations and giveaways and drawings. And so we've made it a gift to the pipeline safety, because that's our only backup is pipeline safety, because we certainly haven't been able to stop pipelines over the years. So we're going to make some drawings. We have 4 half-pounds of wild rice, and we have the print. I don't know if we should do the print first or some wild rice.
Let's do the print first.
Do the print first. Hold on, Carl's getting his ticket in my hand. Okay, go ahead. Uh-oh, you going to stir him up or something, make it look real?
Yeah. So that's what the ticket is in the back, and we're going to let Frank do the drawing, and as is customary with just about every tribal event I've been to, they bring gifts. I'm often gifted, salmon and stuff from the tribes out our ways. And so it's a real honor to do this. You got to be present to win. He's going to pull the ticket, and then we're going to give away the wild rice too, which is native harvested wild rice. And just one other thing, a lot of people traveling on airplanes are going to have a hard time taking that picture with them. So we've arranged, one of our staff people, there's a FedEx place just down the street, and if you win it, we'll go package it and ship it to you. So, all right. Pick the winner.
Should I just look through?
And I made sure all the tickets are in here match this number. So.
Okay, we're going to see if that person's here, if they left early. They must all have the same numbers. I'll just use the last three. 594?
Oh, damn. 594.
What did you say the number was? No. 594?
All right. Lois Epstein. I swear to God I didn't know her number. Okay, you want to draw some for the wild rice?
Okay, we have 4 half-pounds up here. They're all the same. Just defend the print is the big deal, I'm sure. Okay. 608.
608. Keep going.
Okay. 532.
532. Oh, we've got a winner. I feel like I ought to be doing a Vanna White thing or something. I don't know.
Be careful with that. 567.
567? Nobody.
I don't know, man.
Teach people to jump on planes early.
They do have a list of these numbers in the back to see who left early. 507.
507, once, twice,
sure?
Gone.
Wow. Boy, you guys are in trouble with Carl here. I should have brought my ticket along. What's your number again?
Oh, I should be looking.
Yeah, I see. Right here. I got it right now. Here now. 578. Now, this is funny.
578.
How many people we got missing?
People don't like rice is what the problem is.
We got 4 AWOL. We got 4 AWOL so far. Okay. Excuse me. 454.
All right, there's one. 454.
Getting closer. We're trusting somebody here? I thought we talked about that a minute ago.
We're all about trust.
I know. That's what we hope for. 523.
523.
Boy,
keep going.
Rebecca's got that list on all these tickets. I'm giving them to her. 598.
All right. 598.
All right. 596. Here we go. All right. Thank you very much. Thanks, Carl.
Give Frank a big hand. Appreciate those gifts.